Your support helps us bring you programs you love. Go to wyomingpbs.org, click on Support, and become a sustaining member or an annual member. It's easy and secure. Thank you.
This summer, Dan Stark's vision of a world-class museum that honors the history and sacrifice of American veterans and works to educate visitors on the history of American freedom will open its doors in Dubois. It's an unprecedented display of restored historic military vehicles and firearms. We revisit Dan Stark's and the National Museum of Military Vehicles next on Wyoming Chronicle.
Funding for this program is made possible in part by the Wyoming Humanities Council, helping Wyoming take a closer look at life through the humanities, thinkwy.org, and by the members of the Wyoming PBS Foundation. Thank you for your support.
And I want to welcome our viewers to this very special Wyoming Chronicle. We're pleased to be joined again with Dan Starks. Dan is the founder of the National Museum of Military Vehicles in Dubois. And Dan, you're almost ready to open your doors this summer. Welcome back to Wyoming Chronicle.
Thank you, Craig. I'm so happy to be here and so happy to continue to share the story of what we're doing with this museum.
And this story just, in my eyes, grows and grows and grows every single day. Dan, we got to visit with you and our viewers got to meet you about 2.5 years ago or so. And at that time, a lot of beautifully restored vehicles, kind of in a warehouse thing, and man, have things changed. Bring us up to date on what's happening at the museum.
Well, our building itself is complete. And much of the exhibits inside the building are complete. So we were 6 weeks away from being ready for grand opening when COVID-19 caused all of our crews to go home and our vendors to shut down. So we're hoping that we can resume the fabrication installation of our exhibits around the beginning of June here, and that'll make us ready to open, subject to social distancing considerations, about the middle of July.
It'll be such an exciting thing for the state of Wyoming. This is a world-class museum. Is it turning out as you envisioned it even 2.5 years ago?
Yeah, Craig, the truth is it's turning out better than I expected. I hoped that we would have something we'd be really proud of that would really appropriately honor the service of veterans and their families, and that would be something that'd be inspirational in educating next generations about the history of American freedom. And I'm so pleased with how it's coming together. And some of it is what I was expecting. Some of it is exceeding my expectations.
Let's quickly go through the numbers, Dan. They're just staggering to me, and then we'll work to give our viewers a virtual tour of what they can expect to see when they come to the National Museum of Military Vehicles. Again, it's just a world-class facility in, of all places, Dubois, Wyoming. Something I'm sure that the community and the county and the state will be very, very proud of for a long time to come. All right, the numbers. 140,000 square feet so far. Is that right?
Yes, and we've already outgrown it.
You have 350 fully restored vehicles so far.
Well, we're actually up over 420 vehicles, and most of them restored. A few of them that still need to be that are in the queue for restoration, but we continue to expand the collection. We just expanded and acquired a Vietnam War Huey helicopter that actually saw combat in Vietnam. So almost every week we get an opportunity to continue to expand the collection. So it's hard to keep up with the numbers.
And something that the viewers may not be as familiar with, you have a very historically significant firearms collection. In fact, it's one of the first things visitors to the museum will see when they come to the museum. Give us its history.
Well, we have multiple components to our weapons vault, and we call this the Unknown Soldier's Weapons Vault. We have a complete collection of every model Winchester rifle from the founding of Winchester Company in 1866 through the first 100 years of Winchester. That's one component. We have military firearms from World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, mostly focused on United States small arms, but also opposing power small arms. And then we have some, for historic significance, the most famous piece that we have, we never imagined would become available to us. It is the musket that fired the first shot at the first battle of our war for independence, at the Battle of Bunker Hill. So we've got the provenance for that musket. It's been in the family of the soldier who fired that musket for the last 244 years before it became available for the first time to the public, with the idea that this firearm deserved to be in a museum somewhere. And we are fortunate enough to acquire it, and now it'll be forever in this museum here in Wyoming.
What do you hope your visitors feel, Dan, when they come to the museum as it's evolved?
I hope that people's spines tingle. The stories that we're preserving and communicating are spine-tingling stories. And from several perspectives. We talk about two themes. We talk about the theme of the service and sacrifice of veterans and veterans' families. And so the stories that we have a selection of stories that just really, as a person goes through them, you say, wow. And the next part of it is educating people that really aren't familiar with our history of freedom, to just talk about what in the world did people do to generate and to preserve the freedom that we have. And for me personally, on both of those fronts, on individual valor and the impact on families, and also on the topic of finding out what our predecessors did, again and again, a person just says, I had no idea, and wow. And so we have a selection of those kind of stories, and that's the purpose of this museum, is to preserve them and communicate them. And so I'm hoping that people's spines tingle just like mine does.
We're going to start our virtual tour here kind of by driving through the front gate. There's a monument there. What is it?
It's a monument of 6 different vehicles. What is especially important in this monument is our tribute to Vietnam War veterans. So this is a subtlety of the museum, and we have subtleties like this throughout the museum, that it's almost like, well, it's best to have a tour because otherwise you'll miss it. So on one side of this driveway, we have 3 significant Vietnam War vehicles. And so the idea of it is we especially want to honor what our Vietnam War veterans and their families contributed to the United States. And so we've right at the first thing a person sees is 3 Vietnam War vehicles on one side: a main battle tank, a bunker buster Ontos, and a Vietnam War ambulance. And so the idea is that what we wanted was, as Vietnam War veterans approach, they'll recognize that and they'll say, hey, this is for us too. And others may just say, here's 6 vehicles, I don't know what they are. So that's the first thing, is a special tribute to Vietnam War veterans.
You've made a Veterans Pavilion, which is kind of a recent addition to what you wanted to have at the museum.
Yes, we have a 25,000 square foot pavilion. It's got electric, it's got lights, it's got a roof, no sides. And so this is intended to be an outdoor venue for summertime, rain or shine, not only for museum events, but also for other community events. One of the issues here during the summer, when anybody wants to have an event outdoors, is, yeah, but what do we do if it rains? And so we thought that we would provide a venue where we've already given you the answer on what do you do if it rains. Just stay undercover there. So this is both a community asset and a museum asset. And
when you say a community asset, I know that the Dubois and the surrounding area will certainly benefit directly. The museum is physically located, Dan, what is it, about 7 or 8 miles southeast of Dubois? Is
yes.
That how you describe it?
Yes, exactly right.
All right. So we continue in now, and we might find ourselves at the reflection wall before we enter the museum. Tell us about that.
You know, it's just wow after wow. So this reflection wall is intended. It starts out looking as like a casual space. We have an M60, a very modern main battle tank sitting in the middle of the reflection wall, and behind the reflection wall we have the American flag. We have the flag for each branch of the military. And we have a POW MIA flag, and so it starts out just looking like something that draws you in, and what's that tank, and that's kind of interesting. But the real power of the reflection wall and of this whole patio area is the quotations on the wall behind. So we have 7 quotations on black granite panels embedded in the wall, and these are spine-tingling kinds of things. They're the kind of thing where either you look at it as a warm-up before you go in the museum, or maybe you've gone in the museum and you come out and your group is gathering, or you're just sitting to rest a little bit before you get back in your car. And we start with a quote from George Washington to the effect that the willingness of our young people to serve in future wars, no matter how justified, will depend directly on how they perceive veterans of past wars have been treated. And so think about that. And then we go on to a quote from Ronald Reagan midway through the wall, reminding people in his version of something that's been said since Roman times through the present. The purpose of a strong military isn't to wage war. The purpose of a strong military is to preserve peace. An eternal truth of strength brings peace and preserves peace. So that's a key theme throughout the museum, and we include that thought, and it's the kind there on the reflection wall. We end on the reflection wall with a quote from the very first four-star general, female four-star general officer in the Army, General Ann Dunwoody, where she talks about the valor and sacrifice and ultimate sacrifice of women warriors as well as male warriors, and says that it's no longer just a brotherhood, it's a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And so, you know, and the other 4 other quotes there too. So they're all things where you just want to, you read it and then it catches your attention and you say, you want to think about it. And so we're calling this our reflection wall because there's a quotation about the meaning of the American flag. There's other quotations about the contribution to freedom that the military and our military history has provided to us. And they're the kinds of things that in just daily life you tend not to think about it. But we're encouraging people to just sit and think about it a little bit and decide what it means to you as you then go back about the rest of your business for the day.
And this is all outside before you've even entered the spectacular museum.
Yes.
You come in, and before we start talking about what's the inside, you've developed the Chance Phelps Theater. Dan, tell us about that.
To me, it's one of the most special parts of the museum, and so we have a theater. It's a 64 seat theater. It gives us an opportunity to show films about the museum. It gives us an opportunity to show war footage, historic military history footage, and also offer lectures, educational lectures. But the point is, we're remembering Chance Phelps, and we're remembering Chance Phelps' family and friends and community. And so this is an example. This is so people would know the Chance Phelps story. He enlisted in the Marine Corps directly out of high school. He lost his life in a firefight at age 19 in Ramadi. He was manning a machine gun in the turret of a Humvee. He was wounded. He recovered and got back into his fighting position and fought until he was mortally wounded. And you think about so that's his story, and just in a quick overview. But what I like best about this theater is some of the memorial of Chance, and then use Chance as an example that there have been hundreds of thousands of others. And so to me, the most touching image in the museum is an image of Chance as a 4-year-old. And you look at him, he's the cutest 4-year-old a person could see, and you just say, just what, and then you think, that's the life. And every warrior who died started out like that, and every warrior who died was cut off from the full life they deserved. And every warrior like that who left a hole in his parents, his family's hearts, and in his friends and in his community, that's what all of this service and sacrifice is about. And so we're remembering that through Chance. We're remembering Chance, and we're remembering others like Chance through this theater. And so that's just one little vignette in the theater, in the museum.
Yeah, and of course Chance grew up in the Dubois area.
Yeah, he's buried in the Dubois Cemetery. His mom lives in town here, his dad lives nearby.
When you come in the front door, the thing that is most interesting to me is this massive, not the vault itself, but the weapons vault door that you have and that you see just right away. And of course, then you come into the weapons vault. You talked about a little bit the firearms earlier.
Yeah. Well, that vault door, the kind of the idea of it is that only exists one other place in the world, and that's at the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. So we saw that there. We found out, we went to that vendor, the tooling was still available, and we had that custom manufactured to us. It's an 11-ton door. And so and the idea of it is, it's decorative, it's eye-catching, it's not what you expect to see when you come into the museum. And that's the message. The message is, what you're going to see here is not what you expected to see. And then this isn't a car park for military vehicles. This is stories. And this is remembering and honoring and educating. This is not about the vehicles. And so that's kind of a metaphor, having that vault door to say, I didn't expect that. And our hope is that as people go through the museum time after time, a person will say, I didn't expect that. I had no idea. As people visit before the museum's open, that's universally the reaction is, I had no idea. And that vault door kind of is a symbol of that.
But then we go inside and we're awestruck, and we start to see the expansive collection that you've developed and how you're presenting it. Folks can see just a little bit of it over your shoulder, Dan. We're going to show a lot more through the show today. But there's an emphasis on amphibious combat landings, and interesting to me is the history that before World War II, there really wasn't much of a history of combat landings. It looks so almost, if one can say, normal in war. That's what we see the footage of.
We're used to it now, but prior to World War II, our prior amphibious landing under combat was in the Spanish-American War when we invaded Cuba. We had no amphibious assault vehicles. The troops actually pushed their horses overboard to sink or swim, and a number of the horses drowned. Others swam into shore. That was how we got to the beach. So World War II, and in World War I, troops went on ocean liners. They went to friendly ports. They got off the ship in a normal civilian condition. World War II was the first war where on a broad basis, the only way we could engage with the enemy was to assault the beach. And so D-Day Normandy is a famous one, but there were numerous other beach assaults, and we needed specialized vehicles for it, and we developed them specifically for World War II. And we learned how to do it effectively during World War II. So we have an example of every major amphibious assault vehicle here in the amphibious scenario. We show the supporting role of paratroopers and the specialized equipment that paratroopers use to support the beach assault. To my side over here, you can see just a little bit of a Higgins boat, an authentic World War II Higgins boat, fully functioning. It was on Dutch television in the North Sea after we restored it. It's just showing what a famous thing. There's only about 20 Higgins boats left today, and this is, we've got 2 of them, and this is one of them. And then we have an example, one of my favorite stories from the amphibious landing scenario is the story of the Marines at the Battle of Tarawa when we attacked Tarawa. In the European theater and in North Africa, we were able to bring these Higgins boats right up to the beach and have troops disembark right at the beach. But in the Pacific theater, a lot of these islands had coral reefs around them, and the Higgins boat could not go over the coral reef. At the Battle of Tarawa, the Marines tried to cross these reefs in a Higgins boat and got caught up on the reef. The Marines then were forced to go into chest deep, chin deep, over their head water. A number of Marines drowned immediately upon coming off the Higgins boat, hundreds of yards offshore. And the Japanese were defending the beach. They had machine gun fire, they had artillery fire. They were slaughtering the Marines as we waded through full combat gear, weapons, heavy ammunition, as we waded through hundreds of yards of water to just get to where we could start to shoot back. So, I mean, what a story. And the idea that the Marines all got off those boats. Nobody stayed on the boat saying, we're supposed to be at the beach. And as the Marines were getting slaughtered, nobody stopped and turned around and went back to the reef. Everybody kept going. There were 70% casualties between the reef and the beach in some Marine units. And everybody kept going, and they took the beach, and they took Tarawa, and that's valor. And that's part of the history of American freedom. That's one of the stories we're telling here in the museum.
One of many, one of many. We go on to the Battle of Bataan. Fantastic display.
Yeah, so people forget. At the Battle of Bataan, the American Army literally was abandoned by the U.S. government, by the military. They were sacrificed. This was after the Battle of Pearl Harbor. We'd lost a large part of our Pacific fleet. The Battle of Bataan, we had MacArthur's army was in the Philippines in Bataan. It was a mixed army with Philippine allies and American allies. And we decided that we couldn't risk more Navy ships to support the army in the Philippines and on Bataan, and we abandoned them. And we evacuated MacArthur and his family and his staff, but we left there our entire army. And the army, including the Philippine allies, it was between 60 and 80,000, so let's call it 70,000 people. Can you imagine having breakfast and looking at your iPad or looking at the newspaper and seeing, oh, we just had an entire army of 70,000 people surrender? And that's what happened, for crying out loud. And who knows that that didn't live through that kind of a time. And so we're remembering that story. And then not only did we have an entire army of 70,000 people surrender, but that army was then marched by the Japanese to POW camps 70 miles away to clear the area for continued combat with the island of Corregidor. And that's the Bataan Death March. We had, of our 70,000 people who surrendered, 10,000 of them died marching 70 miles. The Bataan Death March. Who remembers that? We do here, and that's the kind of thing that we remember and honor, and we want to pass it along and talking to people about the history of American freedom.
Take us through the U.S. Combat Vehicles Rotunda.
So we have an example of every type of ground vehicle the United States used in World War II, combat vehicle. So again, it's an area, and they're all, now here, this is the only place in the museum where really they're lined up together so you can see they're lined up as a form of communication, because then you can see, for example, a half track and all of the things that we did with a half track by way of reuse of parts, simplifying our supply line, designing for manufacturability and suitability for mass production. And you see that with our tanks, you see that with our scout vehicles, our light tanks, you see that with tank retrievers, with artillery, you see it with our tank destroyers. One of my favorite stories in the U.S. Combat Vehicle Rotunda is the story of our tank destroyers. We were completely unprepared for tank warfare at the beginning of World War II. Our military made the determination after World War I there was no future in tanks. And so we didn't develop tanks, and we didn't develop weapons to combat tanks. And then the Germans have their blitzkrieg, and all of a sudden this is about tanks. So we had a 37 millimeter towed anti-tank gun to fight tanks. That was our armament. We went from that at the beginning of 1942 to fully purpose-built tank destroyers, 90 millimeter gun, the M36 Jackson, in just a 3-year period, 42, 43, 44. We did that while we're building 100,000 Liberty trucks. We did that while we're building a 2.5-ton trucks, while we're building Liberty ships, while we're building aircraft. I mean, the mobilization of American industry and the capability of American industry to be so mobilized in order to supply our military that went from about 600,000 troops to 16 million troops is a whole story in itself, and there's so many components to it. So we're set up to tell those kinds of stories. You don't see it looking at the vehicles, but we communicate it to an extent with the documentation that we post by the vehicles, our storyboards, and then really it all deserves to have some tour commentary to really just weave the whole fabric of all of these stories.
Dan, the 130,000 square foot building is what people are going to see, but that may not be the only 130,000 square foot building that people might see in a couple, 3 years. Is that still the plan?
Yeah, that's the plan, because of our over 420 vehicles, we can only offer to share about 200 of them in this first building. So we're out of space. And so this building will include, we have a significant story of World War II. We're in the process of building out a significant story of the Korean War and of the Vietnam War, but then we have no more space. So we have the Cold War still to talk about. We have a global war on terror to talk about. We have other more recent military history to talk about, and that will require another building. And we have a lot of vehicles and other kind of story components to help seed and spark storytelling about these other aspects of our military history and our national security and our history of American freedom.
You plan to be open every day, Dan? Is that the case?
Yeah, now the COVID-19 throws a wrench in the works, of course. I mean, so we don't know when we can open safely with social distancing requirements. So we know, and then, but once we're normalized, whatever normalized becomes, our plan is to be at least during between Memorial Day and Labor Day to be open 7 days a week, and then we'll learn as we go to see what level of interest there is visiting the museum when there aren't as many visitors in this part of the country, and we'll see if 7 days a week is the right balance or if it's something different.
In the interest of full disclosure, Dan, it's been an honor and a privilege for me to work with you and your great staff developing your website and your ticketing and entry control systems, and it's just been a real pleasure. So Dan, we appreciate it again. I think that people should follow regional media this summer to understand when the museum will open. Well, I want to thank my colleague Kyle Dubois, who's behind the camera shooting you right now, keeping social distance guidelines in mind, but he's provided our viewers with all of the wonderful B-roll that they've seen in our program today. And Dan, we look forward to it. Can't wait to come through the front doors. Again, thank you so much for joining us on Wyoming Chronicle.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Funding for this program is made possible in part by the Wyoming Humanities Council, helping Wyoming take a closer look at life through the humanities, thinkwhy.org, and by the members of the Wyoming PBS Foundation. Thank you for your support.